75 to 80 years.
That may be.
Not any further, earlier than
I
that.
think so.
Well, it doesn't
The
really
hurricanes
matter.
have been about 80 years, 75 years apart on average, the big hurricanes.
Okay, we'll discuss that later. Let's start here. Okay, so we've had a number of classes. I am going to basically go over the way we are translating or explaining the story of Abraham and Isaac. And in order to do that, I wrote up each word we've explained in different ways, and this is not a final thing, it has to be tweaked and fixed a bit, but at least it'll give a background to the class, whoever hasn't heard it before, or put it together a little bit. So the story of Abraham, translating it, should go something like this. The new journey came following the previous happenings. Abraham went on many journeys, and this is like his last major journey. The boundaries were removed to reveal the full potential of soul energy, Abraham. The Creator empowered Abraham, the soul, and the person Abraham immediately felt it. Sometimes we feel things, and it comes from God, it comes from somewhere. He made him pay immediate attention to all aspects of his composition, his body, soul, and the love and kindness that he embodied. He did this with joy. He understood that he needs to use his comprehension with all his powers to flow with desire and the oneness of the Creator. This journey will bring exchange and transformation that is needed. The elevation needs to happen in a specific setting that you will know when you come to it. That's what Abraham is told. With alacrity and deep introspection, Abraham moved to examine what he had to do. He bound the physical and emotional aspects so that they do not interfere with the spiritual and soul journey. He brought together all his learning and experiences from his younger years. With joy through his whole being, he figured out or broke through the pathways of elevation. With all his power, he was able to go deep within himself, to the place of the divine presence that was put into his consciousness. When he came to a balanced space, he was able to raise his awareness and saw that what was once far is now in his grasp. Abraham turned to his experience and knowledge, directing it to wait and retain its association with the lower realm, while he and Isaac go to where they need to be. So this idea, when you have an out-of-body experience, you need to wait to get back to the physical, so you leave something physical. Here it was an internal journey. So he had to let his internal physical being, everything in him that relates to the world, even the soul aspects that relate to the world, to stay in contact so he can go and come back to the part of soul that's still connected to the body. So it's an internal journey. A lot of people go on internal journeys and crack up. So you have to know how to go so you can come back with a balance. Abraham figured out that the journey was for Isaac to have an experience, which is why Isaac is still called a lad. It doesn't say his name at one point, it says the lad. Because Abraham saw him as still being someone who needs the experience, someone young. Abraham took control of his fire and the desire to be consumed, meaning to leave his body, and they went together for one purpose. Isaac looked at his father and saw the fire and pathways that his father had opened, and decided this whole journey was for his father. He asked his father where the entrance for elevation is, to which Abraham responded that Elohim will show it the place to Isaac. So some of this we've done, some we haven't, but that's a general way of reading the story, which may make a little bit more sense as something that's a living Torah, that's relevant to daily life, and not just a story of something that once happened. So if the Torah was taught in this way, I think people would see it and understand it better and learn the lessons in the book and not have to go through life learning it because they've studied it already. But instead it's often taught as a story which has its own things, but it's a little bit different in its application. I'm also just going to go over a few things that, a few brief things, just add to some of what we've learned in the previously. We previously spoke about the idea of chamor, a donkey, and the donkey, the same letters of chamor is also chomer, means the physicality, the physical presence. So let me just take to another thing that I always keep hearing about Mashiach, Messiah, being poor and riding on a donkey, and I'll explain that with this as well, what that means. I guess he couldn't afford a Ferrari or something, so he got a donkey. But then, I don't know what they had then. They could have had all different types of ships. Anyway, there's a donkey which Abraham has, and there's a donkey which Moses has, and a donkey which the Mashiach, the Messiah, will have. And in Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer, it says it's all the same donkey. Basically, in other words, there's some relationship that they all have. There's some connection they all have together. There's some continuation there. Most people read it's the same donkey, but it doesn't have to mean the same donkey. It just means the same spiritual concept, the same idea. But there's a difference in the way each one handled the donkey. By Abraham, it says he put the wood, he put his instruments on the donkey. By Moses, when he was coming to Egypt, it says he put his wife and the kids on the donkey. By the Messiah, it says he will ride on the donkey. Each one is a little bit different. The Baal Shem Tov explains that about the term donkey, and he says, Kisira chamor senachat rovetz tachas masoi. When you see the chamor, the donkey of the person you hate, bending under its load, it's too heavy. The Torah says you have to help him, even though you hate him. You have to help the person, which is another interesting thing, that the Torah says you have to have compassion for everyone and do what's right, even if you hate the other person or the other person is wrong. It's not, you have to know when and what in each thing. So the Baal Shem Tov explains that the chamor refers to the physical aspects of a person, and when you see that a person's physical is too much, then you have to help them. And through refining what the Baal Shem Tov also explains is that who's the one you hate? It's your own physical body. Why am I in this world? Why am I living here? I hate my life. There's a lot that people judge themselves and hate themselves. So he says the one you hate is yourself. You may let it out on other people, but it's really yourself. So he says you have to refine your own physical being and elevate it, and that way it elevates the soul as well to a place the soul can't do it on its own. You have to do it. Anyway, in the time of Abraham, there existed a complete separation between the spiritual and physical, the higher and lower realms. They were kept separate. People were spiritual, but it was in a physical way, not in a spiritual. And it's the same thing. People, Kabbalah, for example, that is a spiritual realm that was kept totally separate. People, except for individuals, people were not allowed to get involved in that. It was two different worlds, two different realms. And so, because there were two different realms, no matter how much you refined and elevated yourself, you couldn't go to that realm. And so, when you did make a connection with that realm, it was only temporary. So if you did something spiritual, at that moment, your intention was spiritual, but that energy couldn't hold on into the physical. The physical couldn't hold it. It could only hold it while you were thinking about it or doing something with that intention. But once you finished, it left the physical as well. It couldn't stay there. And that's what it means by Abraham, that he put the physical elements above the chamor. It was, he himself couldn't be elevated, his things, just the physical elements that you do something with can be elevated there for that particular moment, but then once you finished your job, They're not anymore. It's just the elements. In the time of Moses, the separation was changed. You had Mount Sinai, where God came down on the mountain, Moses went up. The separation between the spirit and the physical was taken away to a large degree, not totally, but to a larger degree. And now you could do things that were spiritual in the physical, and the physical would retain that energy. The energy wouldn't leave it. It might become mired and blocked by other things, but it would retain the thing. So it wasn't total, but it was things much closer. It was the physical. So Moses' wife and children were put on the chamor. There was a retaining in the family and in the physical that connected. But Moses himself didn't go on. In the time of the Messiah, then the separation will be totally taken away, and then the Messiah himself will be on top of the chamor, because the physical and spiritual will now be one world together. They will come together, not as separate places. And that's why the difference in the terminology of what the relationship to the chamor, to the donkey, or to the physical refers to the physical. Now, the sages say that Zocho, if the people merit, then Messiah will come riding on the clouds. If they don't merit, then it will become riding on a donkey. So, what does the word Zocho mean? The word Zocho, which is translated as merit, also means refine. So if we refine ourselves in spiritual matters, then when the Messiah comes, we'll be on a cloud. This will be great, because we've been doing this all the time, this spiritual stuff. But that's people who are involved in the spiritual realm. They're not involved in the physical, refining the physical. They're just involved in being spiritual. There are a lot of people that like to be just spiritual, and that's where they're involved. So for them, the Messiah will be a spiritual journey, another journey. But if we work on refining the physical, the poor matter, then we'll reveal, when the Mashiach comes, a higher level of godliness through the transformation, and will actually be riding on and above the physical. So the poor doesn't mean that he will be poor. It means that we as people will work on refining the poor and the physical things, the very coarse things, which people consider poor, which people step on. If we work on refining the coarse things, then when the Messiah comes, the elevation will be much greater than those who are only involved in the spiritual things. So it's a little bit different way of that's normally not explained. It's actually the opposite. Okay. Another aspect of what we had spoken about is Abraham. And while this is not a class on Kabbalah, but I do want to bring something from the introduction on the Zohar. And it's interesting. If you can follow it, that's great. If not, don't worry. We'll get back to normal talk in 5 minutes. But I thought I'd just share it anyway, because it may pick up something either you'll understand now, or at some other point, hey, I heard that and let me figure it out. And it does actually explain a few interesting things, but you'll see. So the introduction to the Zohar. Right, it is a long introduction, a lot of commentary, but it says that Bereshis, the first word of Genesis, it doesn't call it Genesis, but the Hebrew word is Bereshis, is the key that everything is concealed. The whole creation is concealed in that word. And part of the word Bereshis has the second word. The second word is bara, which is translated created, and more properly it means brought forth, actually. Created, it's not like a new thing, it's just something is brought forth, so it appears new. So the word bara, which is the second word Torah, is actually part of the word Bereshis. Half the word Bereshis is bara. So the question, it says, when was the key opened? When was the bara separated from Bereshis? When did it move forward? And it says it was opened, the key to creation was opened in Genesis chapter 2 verse 4, where it says, where Abraham came along. Now, you don't read Abraham, but you'll see how Abraham is there. It says, these are the outcomes, Ela Tel Shemayim V'aretz, these outcomes of the heaven and earth, Bihi Baram, which is translated when he created them. The term in Hebrew is Bihi Baram. And the letters, those letters, if you rearrange them, turn them around, read Abraham, Avraham. The word Bihi Baram, without turning the words around, can be read Behei, with the letter Hey, Baram. He created them, he brought them forth. Which can refer to Abraham, who went on his journey after the letter Hey was added to his name. It used to be Abram, Avram, and then the letter Hey was added, it became Avraham. And this journey that we are discussing here, the Akeida, happened after the Hey was added to his name. The Hebrew word bara has 3 letters, Beis, Resh, Aleph, and the same letters, if you just take the last letter, put it at the beginning, it becomes Aver, which is a limb, which refers also, Aver refers to the limb, the part of the person that seeds, that people, the children come from. And in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 26, it says, Mi bara Ela, who created these? The word Mi is Mem Yud, who created Ela is Aleph Lamed Hey. And the verse, there's another verse, which is in Job 26, verse 7. It says, he suspends the earth without what? Now, the word what is ma. So, the first word of the Torah, Bereshis, is the potential. The second word is already something brought forth, the word bara. And then you have the word ma, what. The word ma is the what is what causes the rearrangement. When you rearrange words, you say, what for? I mean, this is what it says. Why are you rearranging it? So it's a what. It's a question. And the what allows things to change. It brings out the question. The mi bar ela, if you take the mi, which it says in Isaiah, mi who created these, you have the word Elokim. Ela is Aleph Lamed Hey, then you have a Yud Mem, which is mi. So the word Elokim, the third word which people translate God, actually is a composite of the 2 words, these who. So it's actually a very interesting energy, the third word. Now, mi is also numerically 50, which reflects the 50 gates of comprehension, which are there in Bereshis. And Hashem took the ma, the what, and connected that with Abraham, with Aver, with the word lim. Ma and Aver is Avraham, and the mi and Ela is Elokim. So there was a what and a why, or who, which were connected with other letters, and other terms came out and brought something forth in the creation. Now, so there's probably more we can go into. I'm just bringing it here that it's a discussion. It's not. It's something we can probably will take a lot more to go into, and I have to put it up and show the letters and do it. It would make more sense if I showed the letters and verses. But I'm just mentioning it because there are. It changes the whole meaning of the first words of Genesis. It's a totally different meaning altogether. That's not what I'm going into here, but it does do that, and how the words are. So Abraham opened the internal key and purpose in creation, and the key opened deep within him. The key turned bara, the word create, or brought forth, to aver, to limb. So bara is brought forth, an opening in creation, and aver is the seeds of creation, specific creations. The mem with the hay refer to this world. There's another meaning also, that the mem and the hay of me, of who, refers to this world, and the me with the yud refers to the world to come. That's another thing that's mentioned. So, for whatever, I hope you got something. Otherwise, we'll just leave it and we'll continue. And if you need to discuss it or want to write it down, we can do that later. But the idea here was that Abraham was the journey that he had. It was something deep within himself, and it wasn't just in himself that he opened. The Zohar is saying he opened something in the creation. He brought an opening for the whole world. In Igrod the Kala from Reb Tzvi Elimelech of Dinov, he describes in Kabbalistic terminology how this story, the whole story of Abraham, actually reflects the tikkun after the shvira. That means that there's a shattering of energy that happened, and the correction, the fixing that has to happen, and he describes it in Kabbalistic terminology. And again, it's not something that we are going to in this class. We're not studying the Kabbalah, but if anyone is interested, it is definitely an interesting thing to go through if you understand the terminology, or at one point you get there. I'm just mentioning it just to tell you that there are other ways of seeing the story and understanding it. Even if we...
Read that for us?
What?
You're going to read it?
I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read it, and the reason I'm not going to read it, this part from the Zohar, I also took out words. I didn't read it exactly the way it was, but this has more, it's more sensible. The other one is strictly Kabbalistic terminology, and you'd have to understand each word, what it's referring to, what it means. So it's really a whole study of its own. But I like to mention it just so that we know that there is more than what we think. There are other ways. Doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just that there are other ways. Now, a third thing. So two things I point out. One is the chamor, the physical, a donkey, Abraham, and a third thing is the third day. We spoke about the third day also being actually a third level, that the word three doesn't necessarily mean three. It also means strength. It has other meanings to it. But the third denotes something specific. We find in Genesis, when it says the third day, it actually doesn't say Yom HaShlishi, it says Yom Shlishi. It was Yom Shlishi, without the letter Hey. Here, it says HaShlishi. It adds a letter. The difference is, there it doesn't need to add a letter, because there, in Genesis, in chapter 1, it's talking about the flow of creation. So there's a continuation. 3 is a continuation of flow of levels, a natural sequence. Here, it's about Abraham and Isaac going beyond the natural self, and that's why it uses the Hey, to give more emphasis to it. And the strength of 3 is that it unites the 1 and 2. It brings something, there's a 1 and 2, that 1 is 1, the two different numbers, maybe even opposites, two different things, and the 3 is something that can bring the two together. So when you have a disagreement, you go to a third to make peace. So there's an idea that the 3 brings out something deeper from the 1 and 2. And that's one of the ideas here. That's why it says Hashlishi, because there's something deeper in the story than just 3. It's achieving, it's about what it's achieving, which is the strength and energy, whatever it is. Okay, so that's just what I wanted to add to what we've studied previously. Now I will go a bit further. So we're up to where it says he took with his hand the fire and the knife, and they went together. So the word in he took, or he led, or explains, we've spoken about what the word he took is before, biyade, in his hand. Now, the word yodo, hand, is quite simple, hand. What else could it mean? But it has several different meanings. It could mean prophecy, it could mean strength, leadership, it could be an angel, control, ready for use, power, greatness, a place. It has different meanings. So this is one Hebrew word which you translate as hand, and you wouldn't imagine different. But let's have a look. In Isaiah chapter 8, verse 54, Rashi comments that the word hand refers to prophecy. The Bechor Shor writes that it's an expression of greatness and leadership. From Isaiah 56:5, it says, "And I gave, or I will give them in my house and walls, hand and good name." So hand means greatness. I'll hand it over to them. I'll give them hand, greatness, and leadership. And based on that, we can explain that which it says in Exodus chapter 17, verse 6, Yad al-Kes-Ka, a hand on the throne of Yud-K, as referring to leadership, that a king from Israel will sit on the throne of Hashem. Otherwise, it's very hard to understand what it means, but that's how he explained it. So, there the word Yad, hand, means leadership. The Talmud in Erechim brings that it's written in Proverbs, Moves v'chaim b'yad lashon, death and life is in the hands of the tongue. Now obviously the tongue does not have hands, but it means that just as a hand can kill, so too the tongue can kill. So we see the hand is used in different ways. In Genesis 16, verse 12, it says his hand is in everything, and everyone's hand is in him. Yad bakal v'yad kol bay. It's referring to Esau. The Bechor Shor explains that this means that he used to travel as a merchant, he used to buy things all over the place, and everyone bought from him. That's a nice way to say it, but when you say your hand is in everything, it could be all types of business you're involved in, and everyone's involved in you, every type of business. Okay. The Rakeach in Devarim writes that whenever it says the hand of God, it refers to an angel. In Exodus 9, chapter 9, verse 3, it says the hand of God will be in your cattle. That's with the plagues. And Sefer Shorashim writes that the term hand is used because power and strength is in the hand. So the word hand is used not to say a hand, a physical hand, but it means to say power and strength. In the book of Samuel we find, Samuel 1, chapter 15, verse 12, that Saul came to Carmel and erected, Vayatzav L'Yad, he erected for himself a hand, meaning a place. There are a few other translations, but it basically means a place. In Samuel 2, chapter 8, verse 3, it says when he was to control his yad over the Euphrates River, to expand the territories and control to there. So again, control uses the word yad. And Deuteronomy chapter 23:13, it says, "And a hand you shall have on the outside," referring to having a place set outside the encampment or the city. The Ibn Ezra writes that just as a hand is ready for a person to use, so too this place should be that's ready to use is called a hand. And Genesis 34, verse 21, the land is wide of hands in front of it. Rachos Yadayim. So we see that when the word yad, hand, is used, it doesn't have to mean a physical hand. It's most of the time it's used as a concept. I hand it to you. You know, you do something good, so I say I hand it to you. It doesn't mean I'm giving you my hand. Okay? I'm respecting for you for it, or whatever. So the same thing here when it says, and he took in his hand, it doesn't necessarily mean he grasped it, held it in his hand. It means that it has another meaning to it. Now, what is he taking in his hand? The fire. Now, some people might be able to hold fire if they know the tricks of how to hold fire. But I don't think he was talking about that. And the knife. Now, in order to understand what the fire is and what the knife is, to know what he's holding, you have to know what the fire and the knife is talking about. So, what is the fire talking about? The fire can be an energy or spiritual fire. When you're all on fire, what does that mean? You're not holding a fire. You're just maybe hot man, but that's, you're on fire about something. You're all excited. It's an energy. The term S, which is before the word Aish, it really doesn't have to be there. It could say, and he took in his hand fire and a knife. So the word S is actually extra. And refers to, it's telling us that there's something more than just a physical fire. It means that he moved and led his journey with a fiery feeling, and that helped to create the fire of what was going on. So at the place that he was going to, he needed that energy and fire. In Sefer Khalil Tiferes, Parshas Truma, it writes that the temple of fire will be in the future. People talk about the God there's a temple of fire that will come down after the Messiah comes. It's built of fire. He says that temple of fire is built by the service of the children of Israel serving the Creator in a flame of fire. In other words, the energy that we have, that we do now, creates the temple that will be in the future. So if you're doing cold, you'll have a cold temple. You're doing it warm, you'll have a temple of fire. And so, I don't know if there'll be a temple of fire coming down from heaven. It's hard for me to imagine that we're creating a temple up there and it's going to come down. What I think it means is that when the Messiah comes and the separation between the physical and spiritual is taken away, and we can see the spiritual and experience it just as we experience physical, then all the energy that we have put into serving the Creator will suddenly be there. That will be the temple of God. All the energy and love that we've served the Creator with. That's the temple that we'll have created. Anyway, so that's the fire he's talking about here. The fire of his enthusiasm in doing this. Ves hamachelas, and the knife. It's a very strange word to use machelas and to translate it as a knife. I mean, in the story where people say he was going to slaughter him, he needed fire and a knife. But the word, the actual word in Hebrew, if you want to say knife, is a sakin. A sakin is a knife. The word machelas actually means something that prepares something to be eaten or consumed. Ma'achel, it enables you to eat. What?
Or rations, actually. Ma'achelet. It suggests a food, right?
It's what?
It suggests a food. It has the word food in it.
Yeah, ochel is food.
Right.
But ma'achel means it's something that enables one to eat.
Right.
It's not normally used.
Right.
It's not a term normally used, but or something eating. The word ochel is food, but it also means in Hebrew, achol also means to consume. That something becomes consumed. You put it in the fire, it gets burnt. It's consumed by fire. Okay? Ochel means it's finished. When someone serves you a plate of food, okay, and then you eat it up, and then they come to you and they say, "How was the food?" You know what you say? What food? There's nothing on the plate. It's all consumed, it's gone, right? Okay, so the word is consumed. That's what ochel means. And the reason why food is called ochel is because you consume it. You finish it off. Unless it finishes you off. Maybe it works both ways. Okay. Now, the word machelet we find there are a few places. In Isaiah chapter 120, it says the sword will devour you. It doesn't mean it will eat you, it means it will finish you off. So that's the word means finishing something off, not necessarily eating. The Talmud Sanhedrin 98b discusses many ideas about the Messiah, about Mashiach, and brings an opinion, it doesn't accept it, but it brings the opinion anyway, that there is no Messiah in Israel, as he was already consumed in the days of Chizkiah. Chizkiah was supposed to be, Ezekiel was supposed to be Messiah, it didn't happen, so there's no more Messiah, it was finished. Interesting, so it uses that word, machelet. We're not going to go into all the ideas of Messiah right now, even though it's an interesting topic. But anyway, so that's what the word machel means, something consumed. In the Kabbalist, so in a journey, in a spiritual journey, you get consumed. You focus on something, you get consumed into it, you don't know anyone's talking to you, you don't know what's going on around you, you're consumed in something. It eats you up. In the Kabbalistic comment, the word actually here is referring to the aspect of water. Mayim. First, before it's talking about fire, now it's talking about water. In the physical, we need water to digest food, that flows through the body. Here we're talking about the spiritual. And the spiritual, we're also dealing with the element of water, something that flows. And within that flow, we become consumed in the spirit, in the energy. So it's talking about fire and water. And as mentioned earlier in a previous class, that the journey was to bring about a balance between Abraham and Isaac, between Chesed and Gevurah, or between fire and water. We mentioned about fire and water, which is the word Shamayim, heaven. People translate as heaven, which doesn't have much meaning, but the word actually means a balance of fire and water. So it's to bring them both to a new balance. And the word tells us that Abraham grasped the manner in which the whole elevation will be able to happen. And he understood that as the elevation comes, they may be consumed in what they're doing. So what we had said, actually the other week, it says v'nishtacha v'nashuva, we will bow and we will return. Is we also mentioned that there's an opinion that says it's not and we will bow and return, but or will either be consumed or we will come back. Abraham himself didn't know exactly what would happen. He just knew the plan, he knew the possibilities of what could or couldn't happen. And so what Abraham did is he was understood, so he took the fire and the energy that he had in his servant. He took the idea that they can be both consumed with the enthusiasm and excitement, they can just get lost in it. And he knew that was possible. And then they went, both of them together. It should say they went together. Why does it say both of them? There was no one else here. It's just these two on the journey. So what it means is they retained their uniqueness. Even though they were going on a journey, they each remained unique. We find previously when Abraham was making a covenant in the previous chapter with Avimelech, it says, and Shnehem, Vayikros Shnehem Bris, they both cut a covenant. And the explanation is, why does it say both of them? Is because Abraham remained Abraham, Avimelech remained Avimelech, they lived their own lives, they just made a covenant so they could live peacefully. Here, it's the same thing. Abraham was one type of person, Isaac was another type of person, and they both had their qualities, but here it says something more, they went together. They both wanted to do what the Creator wanted. And because they both wanted to do what the Creator wanted, it didn't matter that they had different natures. They both submitted their nature to the Creator so they're able to go together. Now, this idea of the two of them, this translation is, you won't find it normally. It's I found the name of Rabbunim of Pshischa, a famous rabbi in Poland, and I found two different stories in two different places how it describes the story. In one place, Michtam LeDavid, it writes there that he got his horse and wagon together and he took some of his followers and they went on a journey. They were going to a city. On the way, they stopped at the stagecoach stop at an inn, and they were sitting there and they overheard some people, and it was two Jewish people talking, and they heard this explanation. And once he heard it, he went back home. He said, "This is the purpose of my journey. I came to hear something," and he went back. He didn't go any further. The other story is in Akeida6, another book, where it says he didn't go on a journey. He sent two of his followers to Warsaw. They went there, they came back, and they heard it on the way back. And when they came to him, they were telling him the whole story, and he says, what else? Finally, they tell this, that's why I sent you. So, the stories are interesting because even though they're different, they tell you that a person who is very spiritual doesn't question why he does something. He has a feeling, whether his feeling was to send someone on the journey and they came back, or his feeling that he went, but he knew, at the moment he heard the explanation, he knew that was the purpose of the journey, whether his personal purpose, the purpose of the people he sent. And this is something that's important in life. We are on journeys, and we get lost in those journeys. We think we have to go here, and we have to go here. No, we don't have to go here, and we don't have to go there. There's something we need to learn. Okay? As long as you learn your lesson, the journey that was the purpose of the journey. So, very often people get really frustrated or think they get all caught up in the journey, but that's not serving the Creator. So you have to stop and listen why the journey's there. If you feel you have to go, you go. So it's a matter of listening to everything and not getting stuck into it. So that's interesting because here they were also on a journey, and Abraham was able to get focused to be able to listen, so he would know the place where he would have to come to. So he listened to everything on the journey. He looked at everything. Where is my lesson? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? And each thing. And he knew then how to go and where to go because he was listening the whole time. This is his introspection. Yachtav, they went together. Their number was Chadiz and Chidor, but they went together with a happy heart to do the will of the Creator. The word Yachtov is from the word Chedva. Chedva means joy. And also in Exodus chapter 18, Vayichad Yisrael means Yisrael, Jethro, rejoiced. And one of the things I guess we can reflect on this is in every generation we need to find a way to do things together, even though we have opposites. We are all opposites in different ways, but we still need to do things together because we're all here basically to serve the Creator. And not to get lost in our own journeys, which are journeys. Anyway, any questions or thoughts?
Are the journeys all the journeys to the Creator? Or if we have a journey, then we gotta serve Him also, like...
Are all the journeys to the Creator, or do we have a journey we have to serve Him? Everything, the Creator is everywhere. And the Creator allows us to go on journeys, or takes us on journeys, and it's up to us to listen to the lesson. And the way we listen depends on where we're up to. Like this story of Abraham, different people explain it differently because they're in a different part of the journey. It says, all the rivers go to the sea eventually. So in a certain sense, we all end up with the Creator. We all die one day, and we all go back. The body goes back to the earth, and the soul or consciousness goes on its journey, and a spiritual journey. We never disconnect, really. So it doesn't really matter which way you do it, but as long as you know that the Creator is everywhere, then you'll be open to listening to it wherever and whatever it is. Yeah, you have to focus and do things, but you don't get lost in it. Okay. Then it says, Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham, Aviv, and Yitzchak, Isaac said to Abraham, his father, and he said, Vayom Avi, and he said, my father. And then Abraham responds, Vayom, he says, Hineni b'ni, I'm here, my son. And so there's a conversation that goes on, a very strange and weird conversation. And the reason for this conversation, we'll explain in a moment. But Vayomer, and he said, now, if this is the third day, we didn't translate it as the third day, but if this is the third day, why didn't they talk for 3 days? It's like they were mutes, and he was. What was going on here? So
Deep thought.
Yeah. When you need your own space and contemplate, that's when the time goes. It can be a day, 2, 3. If that's what you're doing, which is what Abraham did, then 3 days makes sense. He was contemplating, understanding every part. It took him 3 days to figure it out. But if it's not that, if he's getting ready and he's running to go, 3 days is a very weird thing. Anyway, so the different commentators try to explain it away, but none of it doesn't really answer it. But you're right, it's about contemplation. Abraham had to figure out what had to be done. God said, go. So, okay, I'm excited. But if you just run with excitement, you don't know if you're balanced, if you're going to do it. You don't know. You don't know if you're going to get there because you're going like a nut. It's exciting. So Abraham was a very strong intellectual, and he used his mind to figure out, okay, I got to do it, I'm happy, let me figure out what I'm doing and how. And he also had to figure out, what am I going for? Okay, God told me to go, what for? There's no, life is fine, there's no, where am I going to? So he ultimately came to the idea that the reason he's going is not for himself. He's going on the spiritual journey to help Isaac in some way, to give Isaac an experience, to give his son an experience. Because Abraham says, I've lived a life with experiences I know, but my son needs to have the experience too. So this is for him. Okay? Now, Isaac assumed that the purpose for this whole journey was not him, it was his father. My father's all excited, he's got this fire, he's figuring out, he's deep in meditation. He's going on a journey. So he looked at his father and he said, this is for my father, so I'm going to go with him, but it's his journey. So this is why it has here, and they went together. And then when it says that Isaac says to Abraham, he's not actually talking. As we've spoken, saying is not necessarily talking, but it's how he looked at his father and how he thought. And he, so the word El doesn't mean he spoke to, but El can also be regarding. Or he realized that Abraham is a new man. It's not Abraham, it's Abraham. He now is the head. My father's different. So it's his journey. He's been going on journeys his whole life. It's another journey for him. So that's how Isaac was looking at it, as his father's journey. And so that's what he was thinking about. And so when it says he said to his father, it's not that he said to his father actually in physical words. In his mind, he's looking and talking, it's his father's journey. And so when his father says, I'm here, it means that Isaac is looking at him and saying, his father is all here, ready to go wherever this journey takes us. So it's Abraham's perception. And Abraham responds, Hineni, I'm ready for the journey. So there is a commentary, Shimshon of Astropol, I think I saw it. Anyway, so he says, at this point, Abraham became Isaac, and Isaac became Abraham. What happened is that because Abraham was going to journey for Isaac, Isaac was going on a journey for Abraham, so in a certain sense, they were letting go of their own quality, their own being, and taking on, accepting to work with the opposite nature. Abraham and Isaac had opposite natures, and Isaac was ready to go with Abraham's nature. So in a certain sense, they kind of swapped. They let go of their own nature to be part of the other one. And it's a very interesting thing, because they discuss here that at this point there was a swapping where Abraham became Isaac and Isaac became Abraham in a certain sense.
So it's kind of like, in other words, one is trying to one is now trying to see things from the other one's perspective.
Yes. Right.
So
Yeah.
you know where they're coming from.
And even more than just seeing from the perspective, even if you don't understand the other one, you're going to do whatever it takes for the other one. So the other one can accomplish being who they are. So you're, in a sense, doing the opposite of your nature.
Like with a child, if you're gonna let them have their moment in time trying to do something, and they're doing it, and you're like, you want to take over and just do it the way you know how to do it better, but you let them make the mistake or just do something in their own way, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how you educate a child. You let the child do it its own way, even if you know better or you know different. You don't do it your way. You stand back and let the child. And not only do you let the child, you help the child do it their own way, even though that's not you. So in a certain sense, you're giving yourself. You become the child. You're giving yourself. You're changing your being to being the child. Now that's one of the beauties that children can do to a parent, is take them out of being an adult and help them be a child again. And be more innocent, if they allow themselves to go there. But yeah. So, it says here, "Vayomer hineni v'yis," Abraham says, "Here I am, my son. I'm here with my son in order to elevate him." And Isaac says, "Here is the fire and the wood, and where is the lamb?" Where is the lamb for elevation? So, the fire is quite obvious. Isaac is saying, "I see you have the fire, you're all on fire." And the wood, which we translate as pathways, you see you have all the pathways. But it also adds the letter Hey here. It doesn't say here is fire and pathways, it says Hey. It adds the letter Hey to tell us it's a specific type of Aish, a specific type of fire and specific type of pathways. Now, he doesn't mention the macheles, the consuming, which is translated as a knife, but we translate as consuming. He doesn't mention that here because that's included in the pathways. So there was no knife here at all. There was no actual physical fire, no actual physical wood, no knife. It's all reflecting the energy of what they're doing. Now, where is the lamb? The lamb is actually not a lamb here. It has a very different meaning. Now, he doesn't say where is the animal for sacrifice. He says where is the seh for elevation. Very interesting. So in other words, Abraham had no intention or thought of sacrifice, and Isaac had no intention of sacrifice or thinking. It just was not an issue here. The sacrifice they were having was a spiritual one where they're giving their soul over to God. Whatever God wants, that's the journey they're going to go on. That's the sacrifice. There was no physical sacrifice, no knife, as we've explained the words. So the word seh is actually lamb is extra. He could have just said, where is the sacrifice? It could be anything. Why a lamb? It could be anything else. So what does the word seh add? Now, the term, there's a lot here. I don't know that if we'll finish it tonight, maybe we'll try a little bit. The word v'ayeh hasel olah, where is the seh for an olah, for elevation, has the initials of ohel. Ohel is a tent. Isaac was asking in what encompassing and protective form will be able to accomplish this mission. You're asking for a spiritual journey. That's an insanity. So we need a protective. What is the general protection? That's alluded to in the acronym of these words. According to tradition, this may be a bit interesting, but during the course of history, in Jewish history, the Talmud brings the stories that there were people, rabbis who knew Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic things, and they actually created animals and even people. The Maharal of Prague is very famous, but there were other rabbis who created a golem for different purposes. And it was used by using the power of creation known from the book of Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is a Kabbalistic book which is attributed to Abraham. And it explained, you can read it, it'll give you words, but unless you need a lot more of the explanations to understand a little bit of it. There's a lot more to it than just that, but that's an opening. Mm-hmm. So it also says in tradition that Abraham created a golem. Mm-hmm. And that's why Isaac didn't have a problem about where's an animal, because he knew that whatever animal, if you're dealing with a physical sacrifice, he knew whatever animal we needed, we just create at that time. And there's also a discussion with the sons of Jacob. When Joseph went, they saw that they killed animals, they didn't slaughter them properly, and so he thought they were eating non-kosher. But in fact, some commentators say they created the animals and slaughtered them. So there are a lot of, the idea of creating animals was a thing that, according to tradition, they knew about. So if you're talking about a physical thing, that's a possibility. Now, why did Isaac not ask Abraham where the sheep was until they were mountain? If he's asking where the animal is, you ask when you go. Why, if you're claiming, if it's a story in the normal sense where you go into a mountain, why wait 3 days to ask him where the animal is? Ask him when you leave. You take the animal with you. But actually, these questions make it more understandable why it's not talking about an animal and a sacrifice. But I'm just bringing this in because this is an interesting point. But it's because he knew his father could just create things by using the letters of the Hebrew language. And when they came to the place, he asked him where, and his father said, Elohim will show him the moment to create the lamb. That would be the answer. But in another sense, it's not that at all. Now, where is the Seh for the Olam? Is an acronym. The word Seh, sheep, is 2 letters, Shin, Sin, and Hey, which are an acronym for 2 words, Shar Hashamayim, gate of heaven. So, what Isaac was actually asking Abraham is not where's the lamb, but where is the gate of heaven for the elevation to occur. That way, the words flow perfectly, and there's no question. Now, Rav Nachman of Braslav explains that when a person asks the question, where is the place of his glory, the question itself creates a correction, fixes something. The reason that the question fixes something because it means the person is looking for a place to reconnect. The where itself takes a person to a higher place. It has no definition other than the word where. So, in this way, when a person asks, they're brought up. The question takes them to the gate of heaven. It fixes and atones for inappropriate thoughts, and the question opens the gate for the person their thoughts. Now, where do we find that this place is called the gate of heaven? We find it by Jacob. Jacob is traveling, and it says, Genesis chapter 28, he says, Hashem is in this place, and I did not know. This must be a house for Elohim, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob calls it a place with the house of God and a gate of heaven. And that gate of heaven is the 2 letters, Seh, lamb. So, essentially, there was never an intention of any physical lamb. There was never intention of anything else. If you understand this as a spiritual journey of elevation, they're looking for the place, and they know when they come to the right place, they will feel it. And then Isaac is saying, where is the gate of heaven that we can elevate? Where is that place? And with that question, where we will finish this class today. Any questions? Where?
So,
Yeah.
so basically, the whole idea with the spiritual journey, is it basically like when you say, you know, they're looking for the place and everything? So the whole is it basically it's a meditative.
It's a meditative space that they're both in. They're actually not going on a journey, walking 3 days somewhere, walking to a mountain. It's actually an internal journey. The temple of God is within us. The gate of heaven is within us. And so they're going in this meditative space. They're going on this internal journey together.
Right. So that whole idea is that, okay, we'll be in the meditative state, and when we get to the right, in that state, when we get to the right place,
then we'll know.
We'll know it'll
Absolutely.
just be.
Absolutely.
It's just there.
Yep.
Now we know.
That's right.
Because in the meditation, not that I'm an expert in meditation, but in the meditation, when you get to that place, it just
is.
You're
right.
there.
Yep.
So
you can't describe it. You can't say, which is why God could not tell him where it is. You have to get there, be there.
You just have to go on that journey until you come across it.
That's right.
In the Kabbalah, when you talked about creating things and stuff like that, I remember before you had mentioned about moving objects and stuff like that too, with and having to do with frequency. Does he speak anything about light and that stuff? Light.
In this story or in Kabbalah?
In Kabbalah, as it pertains to the possibility when you were saying about creating a lamb or creating an animal, but with the Kabbalah.
No, I haven't seen anything describing it with the terms of light.
Just frequency, or well, I don't know. Does it speak about frequency also? Or?
Well, this idea of gate of heaven is, you can understand however you want, whatever that means. It basically means the opening to come to a new level of connection with the Creator in a balanced way, a new balance in your life. So it's like you go through life, you come to a place, everything is fine, you've made it. What next? Where do you go next? Okay? So something happens, you make a mistake, you fall, and then you go on another journey that takes you to another level. So they're basically going to the next level in their journey, which is not a normal journey because it's a spirit journey, and it can be much more dangerous than a physical journey, because spiritual journeys you may not come back from. Physical journeys you get hurt, broken, but you can usually rebuild yourself or go on. Spiritual journeys, if you crack up, you're gone. So it's actually a more dangerous journey, and that's why doing it with full awareness was important, and knowing what protection they had was important. That's why it took time to do it. It didn't just happen. And that's what actually the whole thing is describing, that spiritual journey. As we're talking, I'm bringing in also some of the physical aspects, the way it's often translated, and just adding to it, because we're more accustomed to that. But once we've done this, you can just go back over the whole thing and go into a meditative journey and the spiritual journey without dealing with that. And it just takes you to another space.
Can you talk about the idea of the protection? In other words, so when you say the protection, can you explain that a little bit? Even just a basic idea.
We, as people, and physically, the reason we have the ability to walk places, to do things, is because there's an energy that holds us up, an invisible energy. We have tools that we can describe it or find them out. But a person needs, whether it's the force of gravity, whether it's energies around us, we have force fields that are invisible to the naked eye that are around us that protect us. Okay? Now, we have also things we don't see everything in the air. We don't see all the bacteria, all the insects under a microscope. We can. Now, if you don't wash your hands, for example, and you're dirty, you'll get bacteria, you'll eat food, and you'll get sick. Okay? In other words, the washing the hand protects you. The washing your body protects you. Your drinking water protects you. Simple things that we take for granted or that we do actually protect us. So in the physical, there's a lot of protection in order for us to live. If we didn't have those things protecting us, we didn't have the wind blowing things away, we didn't have the cold to kill different things, all these things create a balance of protection around us. Okay? That's in the physical. The same thing is in the spiritual. A lot of people think they can study and they go into spiritual, and it's great. They understand it and they can explain it, but they're lost and they don't see it. So in order to really be connected, it's actually a journey that has to be done with a lot of care. So there has to be a spiritual cleanliness, an understanding of things that are beyond our own mind, not being stuck in your mind. And that's what I saw a commentary interesting in the Torah. It says the Jewish people said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, we'll understand. And the question is, shouldn't you first study and then do? What does it mean we will do first and then understand? And the one explanation is actually quite simple. Most of the time, when people do things, or they study things, we know what we're doing. We understand, or we think we understand why we're doing things. We think we understand life. So we do our life, we live according to our comprehension. Our mind understands that if you live in a certain way, you do certain things, this is the end result. So we have these things in our mind, but we don't understand beyond our own mind. We only understand, and if you talk to a lot of people, you'll see they're nice people, nothing wrong, they just don't get it because it doesn't penetrate the mind. The mind doesn't get it. So they're limited in their mind. The idea of Na'aseh v'nishma is that by doing what God wants, we experience it, and then we can feel, okay, beyond, and we can understand, we can get a grasp of things beyond our own mind. Once we do what God wants, then we see things that our own mind can't see on its own. So when the Jews said we'll do and understand, it doesn't mean that they were dumb and they didn't study, didn't know what they're doing. It means that we know that the only way we can understand what the Creator wants is that since the Creator is beyond our mind, the only way we can connect is by experiencing it, through doing it, and then we'll have an understanding of things beyond the capacity of our own mind.
Yeah, I've experienced that, so
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And that's what it means. And so, but you need a protection. So the Jewish people were given a lot of different things to do, which those things protect them, that as they go beyond their own mind, it creates an energy protection for them in different ways. So the tefillin we put on creates a balance, the tzitzis we wear creates an energy field around the body, the mezuzah gives an energy that protects from certain, each one protects in different ways. And those are things that we were given to do so that we can go on a journey and keep a balance. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very interesting.